Potpourri Pastimes. I'm Verna Pittman, and I'll be your host for the next half hour as we talk about bees. Bees and beehives and all about honeybees. And John Kennedy is here. He is a beekeeper and he knows bees. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much.
I'm so glad you're here to tell us all about bees. But before we get started with that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm from Northeast Pennsylvania, where there are lots of lakes and woods. It's a sportsman's paradise, a great place to grow up. As a kid, I was out in the woods fishing and with my BB gun a lot with my friends, and had a great time growing up there. Then I moved to San Francisco after college. It was like arriving on another planet and so on. And eventually got to Pocatello, which was actually a pit stop on the way back from Pennsylvania. And that pit stop has lasted over 20 years now.
You stopped in and you stayed, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we're glad you did. So tell us, how did you really get interested in beekeeping?
Well, we were living in San Francisco on Potrero Hill, and I saw in the paper they were offering a class in beekeeping at one of the schools there, and I went and took a class. The official, the honorary beekeeper of San Francisco, Louis Dubé, was a teacher along with Lenore Bravo. And at first they didn't think where I lived was a good place to have bees, because I lived on the west side of this hill and it's very windy there. So I didn't get bees the first year, but I got bees the second year, and my bees did very well. There are a lot of eucalyptus trees in San Francisco, a lot of fruit trees, wildflowers, garden flowers, and it became something that just became a major part of my life.
Mm-hmm. So did you just start with one hive? Is that what you
started with two?
Started with two.
And they threw swarms, and then I had 3 and 4, moved them from my back porch up to my rooftop, and they did real well there.
Uh-huh. I just never think of San Francisco as a place that, yeah, you know, you'd have beehives, but because here we see them out in fields or something. You know?
Well, there are hundreds of beekeepers in San Francisco, and usually when you live in cities or towns and have bees, you put them in a spot where your neighbors don't even know you have them, or passerbys, and they just come and go, and if you don't bother them, generally they don't bother you.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Well, you know, what exactly makes up a beehive, John? You know, I think we need to start with a 101 version here.
Well, this is a beehive right here.
Okay.
And it's a bee colony that lives inside. This beehive I have here is made up of 3 medium boxes. Most beehives you'll see out in fields are made up of what are called, well, they're larger boxes. Each box is about 3 inches bigger. I like to use this size box because all the frames then are interchangeable. Most beehives are 2 deeps, and then they'll have the mediums on top for the bees to put the honey in that you'll actually harvest and so on. What we do, human beings, we give the bees more room than they would actually occupy in nature, generally speaking, and so on. I can show you what the inside of a beehive looks like.
So is that a good thing that you give them more room, or not a good thing?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's a good thing,
okay.
As Martha would say. And but I have a picture here of a queen and a
which one is she now?
Well, she's the big one in the middle.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And she is kind of an egg-laying machine. All the work in the bee colony is done by the females. The males do no work. Their only goal in life is to mate. And they have no stinger, but if you see one, you know that he has not accomplished his life's mission, because he dies after mating. They mate in the air. She can do multiple matings on her nuptial flights, and she becomes a widow on her wedding day, you might say. So this is...
So let's see, let's go back there.
Okay.
The queen is the one that has all the babies.
She lays eggs. The eggs hatch in 3 days, and if it's going to be a worker, females, they're the only ones with stingers also. It takes 21 days from the time the egg is laid for her to emerge as an adult bee. A queen only 16 days whenever they raise a new queen. In a drone, the male takes about 24 days.
Okay, but the females are the ones that go out and gather the
Right.
pollen?
Pollen and nectar.
Okay.
And then they bring it back and they ripen it in the hive. and so on.
Okay. So
And-
let's look at the hive then.
Okay.
Okay, now that's the lid that you just took
Right.
off.
And sometimes lids, if they have a telescoping outer cover, they'll have these inner covers. And the inner cover for a telescoping outer cover this inner cover makes it a lot easier to get the outer cover off, because the bees will glue down any tight spaces and so on. They make a product called propolis. It's made from resins and gums from trees and other plants, and it has antibacterial properties that they coat the inside of the hive with.
To make it just kind of airtight?
Yeah, it helps make it airtight. And these are the frames. This I'll show you a frame with drawn comb in a minute. But what we do is buy from the bee supply company. We have foundation, and this is wax that has the imprints of hexagons on it. Then we nail this together with this frame, and then what the bees do, they will produce wax from glands in their abdomens, and they draw out the wax to make comb. And I'll show you what that comb
They draw out the wax from this, or they make new wax?
They make new wax.
Okay.
And so on. These hexagon, the shapes of the cells are hexagons, and this is actually plastic and sprayed with wax, and you can get foundation. This is called foundation, and you can get it that's just all wax, or this is a new kind of a modern thing, and it makes for a real strong comb. And what the bees do then is to draw out the foundation into wax, and then they will pack the honey in there, and then they will cap it. And so what we do then, when we harvest the boxes of honey, is that we get to go back to this inner cover again. What we'll do is if we want to take this box away from the hive, and it's full of honey, but it's also full of bees. So how you get the bees out is to use something like this. This is called a bee escape, and so on. And when we put this here, the bees can go down inside. They can smell their nest underneath, and they'll go through here, but they can't get back. They can't get back.
Get back up.
Back up. Mhm.
Okay.
So this is one way of getting the bees to go down. Now the big operators, commercial guys, they just have these blowers. They'll set the boxes down, and they'll have these blowers and just blow them out and so on. But small operators like me, I'll just put this under here with another cover there, and within 24, 48 hours, 99% of the bees will be out of here.
They'll leave the
Right.
honeycomb part and go
Yeah.
down to their, what's in the bottom? What's in the next? Is that
Well,
the nest?
Well, yeah, I'd like to get, each one of these will hold about 30 pounds. So if you can get 3 of these boxes in one season, about 90 pounds of honey, you're doing real well. And you can do that around here. Now I have a comb here. Now when the queen has laid eggs, if the queen goes up into these boxes and lays eggs, this comb will become a lot darker then, and so on.
Okay.
But this is what we would call virgin comb that the queen has never laid eggs in, and so on.
Okay.
So what it looks like when, let's see, I don't think I have any comb that the queen has, any brood comb, but this is then what it looks like.
Oh
isn't it?
my goodness.
And
And there would be honey in there.
this
Or there is honey in there now.
is honey in there. Let's feel the weight of that about.
Oh! That is really heavy.
Yep. So this is about 3 pounds of honey in here. And so then to get the honey out, What the beekeeper does then is to cut the cappings off with the serrated knife. There are a couple ways of doing that, or you can scrape it off with a wire brush of sorts, and then you put it in an extractor, about 4 frames per extractor, the smallest extractors there are, and you can hand crank them, which can be kind of difficult to get all the honey out, or they have the electric motor ones. But the big operators, they'll have ones that hold 48 or 96 combs and more of a production level.
Oh.
So this, let's see, we have a darker comb here. This comb, well, this comb looks like it's had some, the bees really never finished packing this with the comb, but you can see there's a little pollen down in here, and this has been part of the brood nest, so I don't think there was any brood in here, but they did have pollen here, and they'd have the brood right next to it. The pollen is their protein source.
Oh, okay.
And we got, let's see, and we got some more unfinished. Now this, what I will do, because the honey will stay good for a long time, I'll just use this as feed for a colony next spring and so on.
Okay, so when are you getting this honey? What time of the year are you getting this honey?
Well, the honey, the first flows around here are fruit trees and in most areas and dandelions. But that honey is used for rearing brood, for building up the colony's numbers and so on.
So when the queen lays the eggs, then they have to have honey to feed the eggs.
That's what the bees are doing. They're all summer long. They're working so they'll have enough honey to get them through winter. But what we do, we get them to store some extra honey. We don't want to take too much from them. Sometimes some beekeepers will take too much from them, and the bees could face starvation, or they can be fed sugar syrup to make up for the honey. But the sugar is not nearly as nutritious for the bees as the honey is, of course.
Okay, so what month? Let's see. Like, so you start in when the apple blossoms are on, so probably in April or May, and then the dandelions. Well, I don't know. They're probably like all year round almost.
Seems that way for some people.
But when is it okay to take the honey from the bees?
The bees. You want the bees to be the strongest in numbers. They'll build up to about 50,000 workers in there. And
in one of these?
Yep.
Oh my, 50,000.
And you want the colony to be strongest at the height of the honey flow. And most of the honey we get around here is sweet clover and alfalfa. So, and that would be beginning mid-June. Mid-June to the end of July is when you're going to get most of your honey around here, your surplus honey, and so on.
So you would go out and take some of these out of here, or take off the top one in July, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll spin it out, and then the combs will still be wet and sticky, and I give it back to them, and they love that. They'll eat all of that, and there's almost no waste in beekeeping. I mean, the wax that you cut off the combs there, that can be used. I don't use it. I save it. Someday I'll give it to somebody to make candles or something out of it. But any wax any honey that is mixed in with wax, you can give that back to the bees. So it's really incredible, all the work they do, and the delicious product we get from them.
Okay, so if this hive has 50,000 bees, and this one over here, let's say if you had another one or another 5 or 6, because when we see them out in the fields, there's several hives out there. Could you interchange, or do they know their own? Well,
generally, yeah, some of the big commercial operators, they'll put bees in fields on pallets, usually about 4 pallets, or 4 colonies per pallet. And you'll see 10 pallets out there, 40 colonies, and they're coming and going here and there. And it's pretty amazing to be in one of those yards. I mean, thousands of bees just flying all around you, but they don't care about you at all. You will get some bees going into the wrong colonies, but if they're coming back with pollen or nectar, the bees will let them in, and so on.
Oh, okay. But if you, those top, what did you call those? The things that you're, those, yeah.
The frames.
The frames. If you took the frames out of this hive, could you put it back in a different hive, or would they? That you could.
Yeah.
They wouldn't care.
No, generally not.
Okay.
What you have to be careful of are the brood frames, because the bees can come down with different kinds of diseases, and a lot of beekeepers treat for disease. There are bacterial, viral, and fungal diseases, and so on. I used to work with beekeepers as an inspector. That I guess we'll get to in a little bit. But generally, I try to put the frames that I took the. Well, I guess I don't either. I kind of mix them up.
You kind of mix them up.
Right.
But you know, one of my next question was, what is happening to our beehives? You know, wherever we look, it seems like we're hearing about issues concerned with bees.
Well, the guy who started that whole thing off, I happen to know him, Dave Hackenberg, back from Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. He's a commercial beekeeper. And in October of '06, it took 3,000 colonies down to Florida, came back to Pennsylvania, went back down 2 months later, and he still had 3,000 beehives, but he only had bees in 2,000 of them. 2,000 in 1,000. 2,000 colonies just disappeared, the bees from those colonies. And that became a big mystery, and so on. They called it colony collapse disorder. And it was in the New York Times, was in all kinds of publications. And a lot of people who generally don't know a lot about bees all of a sudden started learning about bees and their value in our food production, because about a third of the food we eat, fruits and vegetables, come from fields that the bees have pollinated. And so I think what happened with Hackenberg is that it was a perfect storm. One of the problems was in the late 80s, this mite arrived from South Asia, from a different kind of a honeybee. It's called the Varroa mite. It's an external mite. In fact, when I started keeping bees here in the late 80s, I built up to about 100 colonies, and these mites arrived, but I didn't know anything about them, like most people. And they transmit viruses to the bees, they activate viruses, and I lost every single colony, about 100 colonies, to these mites. And there are mite treatments, miticides and so on, and I use them somewhat, but then the bees build up resistance to the treatments, and so you'll have mites that are stronger. And now I don't use any treatments at all. And to get back to what Dave Hackenberg's problem was, and this has happened before, because normally in nature, our honeybees, by the way, are originally from Europe. Honeybees did not live here before the white man started bringing them over. The Indians called them white man's fly. When they saw the honeybees starting to come, they knew the settlers weren't too far away. So the commercial operators also, they moved their bees thousands of miles to pollinate different kinds of crops, and they use different kinds of treatments on them, and the bees are stressed out from having to move so often. So I think everything that could go wrong did go wrong with Dave Hackenberg. He's back in business again, but a lot of people were affected by these mites big time.
So the mites are the big problem. Well, are there any problems with like yellow jackets or other kinds of bees? You know, I mean.
Well, at this time of the year, especially when there's not much nectar coming in, and the yellow jackets seem to be at their strongest numbers, you will see them kind of trying to make their way into a honeybee colony. But the bees, a strong colony can usually keep them at bay.
They'll fight them.
Yep.
It's like a little war going on there.
I do see sometimes a honeybee that's gotten weak for some reason on the ground in front of a colony. And I've seen yellow jackets just a few days ago. They'll chew the head off of a bee and fly off with the head, and the rest of the bee is still just walking around without its head.
Oh dear.
So
I don't know if that's good or not.
Well, I don't bother them. That's
Yeah.
nature's way.
Yeah, So, if we wanted to be a hive keeper, where do you go? I mean, did you build that yourself, or did people buy all these supplies?
You can buy just about everything. I mean, some guys are able to make some of these things, especially the boxes, but I buy my boxes. There are a couple major big operators that have been in business for a long time. I have there the American Bee Journal that's been in publication for over 100 years, and they also, it's published by Datant, and they're out of Illinois, but they're probably the largest bee supply company in the world.
Oh, that they sell supplies, okay.
Yep.
And then you have this book here, too.
Right.
That apparently, if you want to know about bees, you can learn in the Encyclopedia of Beekeeping.
Right. I'm not sure if that's my inscribed copy or not, by Roger Morse, who's kind of the big bee yard up in the sky now, but he used to be a beekeeping instructor at Cornell University.
Oh,
It's said that more has been written about the honeybee in the English language than any other
any other subject, huh?
subject except man, right.
Oh, except man, okay.
Right, and so on. And because of their value in pollination, you could argue that they're the most important animal on Earth, too.
Yeah, because that's what we have to remember, is that it doesn't matter whether we're talking apricot trees or apple trees or alfalfa, or probably even our squash and cucumbers and tomatoes and all those things. They all start life with a bee.
Well, the big operators in the West who have thousands of colonies, like Cox up in Shelley or Miller and Blackfoot, they, in the fall, will send their bees to California to pollinate almonds. They send them on flatbed trucks, on pallets, 4 hives to a pallet, and I think 102 pallets, which makes about 408 beehives on a flatbed, and they take them to California to pollinate almonds. They'll put them in fields, staging fields in the fall, and then move them into the almond orchards in February for about 3 weeks. And
the bees go on a road trip, is that what you're saying?
Big time.
And then they bring them back again?
And some of the big operators, then they'll ship their bees to Washington and to pollinate apples. And that's where the money is for a lot of these guys.
Oh.
And then if the honey can just pay for their expenses, they've done very well. They're now paying about $150 per colony to pollinate almonds, when about 5 or 6 years ago they were paying $50 and so on. But because of this colony collapse and fewer bees, they need to offer more money, and there's such a tremendous worldwide demand for almonds that the growers are able to pay it.
So is this an expensive hobby? I mean, I know what you're saying with pollinating, but like to buy the box and all that?
Well, one of these boxes will cost you about $5 or $6. A frame with foundation will cost you about $2. So, and then the bees, you can buy bees in packages, and a wooden box with screen and a queen and a little cage in there. They'll cost anywhere from $45 to $65. Or you can buy a nucleus colony, a small colony of bees in a smaller box with a laying queen for about $65. So you're looking at least $130 per hive just to get started.
Just to get started.
Right. And then you need a veil.
I was going to say, and how does this work, John?
Well, this is pretty easy to put on.
Oh, are you going to put it on? Okay.
Sure. Generally, I don't even use one with my bees. They're pretty gentle, but...
Your bees are gentle?
Yep.
Okay.
And so, but this is all you got to do, and then just tie it around yourself and so on.
So that they don't get to your face.
Right.
Yeah, so do you have gloves on?
Stings on the end of the nose hurt. And
so, I bet.
I don't wear gloves. In the smoker, to kind of calm them down a little bit, you can use old burlap or some old rotted wood. And generally I don't smoke my bees. They're pretty gentle, but now they've become very protective of their harvest, so sometimes you got to give them a little bit of smoke and so on. The smoke is supposed to make them think that there's a fire on the way, and then they load up with honey, and they think they're going to have to fly off to somewhere else, and so it kind of really sedates them a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And you need a hive tool. So
And what is that?
Just a pry bar to pry the boxes apart.
Oh,
like
okay.
Because they'll get stuck
Because
down.
they stick them
And
together.
Yep, and then they'll pry them up, because in between here, where this edge touches here, they will propolize it, and they'll glue that up, and it can be, without a hive tool, it can be very hard to get, well, almost impossible to get out of there. But beekeeping, this is about as high tech as it gets, you know, and so on.
So, you know, so you get the honey out. How long does this last? If you're there looking at honey that you've taken from your hive, how long does that last?
A jar of honey?
Uh-huh.
Well, I sell honey at the farmer's market, and people often ask me that question, and I tell them honey will last thousands of years, but if it goes bad in 500 years, they can always bring it back, you know. They found honey in King Tut's tomb that was still good.
Did they? Did they? Okay. Where is the best place to store honey? And this is kind of like for any homemakers that might be listening. You know, should we put it in the refrigerator?
No, 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 no. It doesn't need to be stored any place special. Just put it in jars. And if it's not heated up to a certain temperature, which I don't do, and I tell people, if it granulates, which it naturally wants to do, is just put it in a pot of water on the stove at the lowest possible temperature, and in a couple of hours it'll liquefy again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And now you've been a volunteer to help people with bees. Tell us about that.
There's an organization in, I think it's Little Rock, Arkansas, called Windrock International, and it's kind of part of USAID, and they recruit agricultural specialists from all different areas, and mine happens to be beekeeping. And in 2002, I was fortunate enough to be recruited to go to the country of Azerbaijan. And 2003, I went to Tajikistan, and 2007, I went to Kyrgyzstan. And these are about 3-week assignments, and try to help some of the beekeepers with some of the problems they have, health problems that some of the bees have. Sometimes they are not able to recognize certain diseases, certain bacterial diseases, especially one called American foul brood, and that's called American. It's a bacterial disease. Bacillus larvae is the bacteria, and it's called American foul brood because the bacteria was first identified in the U.S., but since the Soviet Union left these former Soviet republics, since the Russians left for the most part, a lot of the native folks there have taken up beekeeping, and they don't have much experience with it.
So you're over there helping them. So, you know, it looks like we're almost out of time, but yeah, I know.
Let's get started.
Let's see. I know that you also are a bee inspector.
I was a bee inspector with the state of Pennsylvania for 7 seasons. I had all of eastern Pennsylvania, southeast and southern Pennsylvania, where I would go around to all the different beekeepers and take their beehives apart looking for brood diseases, and help them out that way to identify
any problems, huh? Okay.
No.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap it up here?
Well, just like to see more folks at the farmer's market and come and buy some of my honey, you know. And so there are only 2 more Saturdays to go, and I think I just have enough honey this year to make it through.
Well, thank you so much, John, for coming and sharing your information about bees and your beehives and everything. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. And thank you, audience. I hope that you learned a little bit about bees and beekeeping today.